Hello guys, welcome to Fictional Vortex. So in this video, we will see what if Naruto was the Soul King's heir, wielding the almighty and the visionary Naruto x Yoruichi, Bleach. If you enjoy these kinds of stories, don't forget to show us some love by hitting the like button and subscribing to the channel. Your support means the world to us. Now, let's start the story. Chapter 2, Fractured Realities, Again. Yoruichi's voice echoed across the vast, empty space of Urahara's specialized training dimension. The sky was an impossible orange-purple, and gravity seemed to fluctuate randomly, sometimes heavy enough to crack the ground beneath their feet, sometimes light enough that a single jump sent you flying 50 feet into the air. Naruto was drenched in sweat, his clothes torn in several places. He'd been at it for 6 hours straight, trying to maintain control of the Almighty while simultaneously defending against Yoruichi's relentless attacks. "I'm seeing too much," he shouted back, ducking under her lightning-fast roundhouse kick. "Every time I focus on one timeline, 50 others scream for attention." Yoruichi didn't slow down. Her fist came within a millimeter of his face before he twisted away. "That's the point. You need to filter. The Almighty isn't giving you every future, it's giving you every possible future. Big difference." She vanished, reappearing behind him, aiming a precision strike at his kidney. Naruto saw it coming, not just that attack, but 17 variations of it, each with slightly different angles, speeds, and follow-ups. The information flooded his mind like a tidal wave of tactical data. "Focus on the thread that matters." Urahara called from his observation point, tinkering with some complex device. "Think of it as a river with countless tributaries. You only need the main current." Naruto closed his eyes for a split second, visualizing the infinite futures condensing into a single, coherent flow. When he opened them, he saw just one clean line, Yoruichi's true attack path. He spun, caught her wrist mid-strike, and used her momentum to flip her over his shoulder. Yoruichi landed effortlessly on her feet, a genuine grin spreading across her face. "Much better. You're starting to get it." Naruto wiped sweat from his forehead. "Yeah, for about 3 seconds at a time before the noise comes back." Urahara approached, his wooden sandals clicking against the strange crystalline ground. "The noise will always be there, Naruto-kun. The trick isn't eliminating it, it's learning which frequencies matter." He handed Naruto a small, iridescent pill. "This might help. It's a specialized spiritual stabilizer I developed. It won't boost your power, but it should help you maintain focus during the filtering process." Naruto eyed the pill suspiciously. "Is this going to turn me into a frog or something?" "Only a 20% chance," Urahara replied cheerfully. "He's joking," Yoruichi said, rolling her eyes. "Mostly." Naruto swallowed the pill. Immediately, a cool sensation spread through his body, like mint water flowing through his veins. The constant buzz of the Almighty, the perpetual whisper of infinite timelines, didn't disappear, but it organized itself, becoming more like background static than a screaming crowd. "Whoa," he breathed, blinking rapidly. "That's better." "Good," Yoruichi nodded. "Now for the hard part. The visionary." She pointed to a massive boulder 50 yards away. "Make it disappear." Naruto focused, reaching for the part of his mind that connected to the visionary. He visualized the boulder simply ceasing to exist, not exploding, not transforming, just, gone. Nothing happened. "I said make it disappear," Yoruichi repeated, crossing her arms. "I'm trying." Naruto concentrated harder, his brow furrowing. The boulder remained stubbornly solid. "You're overthinking it," Yoruichi observed. "The visionary isn't about effort, it's about absolute belief. You don't try to change reality, you simply know that reality is different." "That makes no sense." "Think of it this way," Urahara interjected. "When you wake up in the morning, do you try to believe your bedroom exists? No. You just know it does. The visionary requires that same level of unquestioned certainty. Naruto took a deep breath. He stopped focusing on making the boulder vanish and instead simply accepted a new truth: the boulder never existed in the first place. Pop! The boulder didn't just disappear, it retroactively had never been there at all. The ground showed no indentation where it had sat, no shadow remained, and neither Naruto nor his teachers had any memory of what had previously occupied that space until Yoruichi deliberately recalled it. Holy crap, Naruto gasped, suddenly dizzy. Did I just erase it from reality? Impressive, Urahara murmured, making notes. You didn't just remove it physically, you temporarily rewrote the causal chain leading to its existence. That's high-level reality manipulation. Is that bad? Naruto asked, noticing their serious expressions. It's concerning, Yoruichi admitted. That kind of power, erasing things from the timeline, it's exactly what Soul Society fears. If you can do that to a boulder. I could do it to a person, Naruto finished, suddenly feeling cold despite the sweat still coating his skin. Which is why control matters, Urahara emphasized. The Soul King's power isn't meant to be destructive, it's meant to maintain balance. To repair fractures in reality, not create them. Their training intensified after that. For days, they worked on precision rather than power. Naruto learned to use the Almighty to track specific events without being overwhelmed by possibilities. He practiced using the visionary for tiny, controlled alterations rather than massive rewrites. By the end of the week, he could predict Yoruichi's attacks 5 seconds before she executed them, and he could manifest small objects, a kunai, a cup of water, a fresh change of clothes, without disrupting the surrounding reality. Progress was happening. But time was running out. We've got company, Yoruichi announced one morning, appearing suddenly in the training dimension. She'd been scouting the perimeter of Urahara's shop in the real world, checking for threats. Naruto, who'd been meditating, opened his eyes. Soul Society. Worse, she replied grimly. Quincy. Urahara's expression darkened. How many? 5. Strong ones. They're using some kind of advanced detection technique, they're tracking the specific resonance of the Almighty. Naruto stood up. Wait, Quincy. I thought they were extinct. Nearly, Urahara explained, already gathering his equipment. The Shinigami wiped most of them out centuries ago. But some survived, hiding in the shadows, maintaining their hatred. And now they've found you, Yoruichi added. Which is a problem, because the Almighty was originally a Quincy power, the signature ability of their emperor, Yoruichi. If they've detected you, they either want to recruit me or kill me, Naruto finished, reading the implications. Precisely, Urahara confirmed. And neither option is acceptable. They quickly formulated a plan. Urahara would strengthen the dimensional barriers around his shop while Yoruichi and Naruto confronted the intruders in a controlled location away from civilians. Remember, Yoruichi cautioned as they prepared to leave, Quincy's absorb surrounding spiritual particles for their attacks. They're exceptionally dangerous to Shinigami, but your hybrid nature might give you an advantage. What about the Almighty? Can they sense when I'm using it? Definitely, she nodded. So use it sparingly and strategically. They exited through one of Urahara's hidden dimensional doors, emerging in an abandoned industrial zone several miles from the shop. The area was perfect, plenty of cover, no civilians, and enough open space for maneuverability. They didn't have to wait long. Soul King Heir, a cold, precise voice called out. Show yourself. 5 figures stepped out from the shadows of a derelict warehouse. They were dressed in immaculate white uniforms with blue trim, the traditional colors of the Quincy elite. Their leader, a tall man with silver hair and calculating eyes, stepped forward. I am Jürgen Haas, Sternritter of the remaining Quincy forces, he announced. And you possess something that belongs to our people. Naruto stepped out from behind a rusted container, Yoruichi flanking him protectively. I don't recall stealing anything from you guys. The Almighty, Jurgen stated flatly. It is the divine right of our emperor, not some shinobi child playing at godhood. Naruto felt a subtle pressure against his mind. The Quincy was actively trying to detect the Almighty's signature within him. He deliberately kept it dormant, focusing instead on his regular chakra flow. Look, I didn't ask for these powers, Naruto said, trying the diplomatic approach. But they chose me, and I'm doing my best to use them responsibly. Responsibility? The Quincy laughed, a harsh sound devoid of humor. The power to see all futures is not meant for responsible use. It is meant to reshape existence according to the will of the chosen. And let me guess, you think you're more chosen than me? Naruto asked, already knowing where this was headed. His Majesty Yoruichi foresaw this moment, Jurgen declared, raising his hand to reveal a glowing blue cross emblem. He knew the Soul King's power would seek a new vessel. He left us instructions for when that day came. The other 4 Quincies spread out, forming a loose semicircle. Naruto noticed they were taking specific positions around him and Yoruichi, some kind of ritual formation. He activated the Almighty momentarily, just enough to glimpse their immediate intentions. What he saw chilled him. They weren't there to kill him or recruit him. They were there to extract the Almighty from him, a process that would leave him an empty husk at best, dead at worst. Yoruichi, he whispered. They've got some kind of extraction ritual planned. 5-point seal formation. Yoruichi nodded imperceptibly. On my mark, drop and roll left. I'll take the 2 on the right. Jurgen raised his hand higher. Heir of the Soul King, surrender willingly and your death will be painless. Resist, and we will strip your power from your still conscious body. Yeah, that's gonna be a hard pass, Naruto replied. Now! Yoruichi shouted. Naruto dropped and rolled as Yoruichi exploded into action, her body becoming a blur of motion. She targeted the 2 Quincies on the right flank, her fists glowing with concentrated spiritual energy. The Quincies reacted instantly. They weren't surprised by the attack, they'd anticipated resistance. Each activated their spirit weapon, bows, swords, and in Jurgen's case, a pair of gleaming daggers. Seal the perimeter. Jurgen commanded. The Quincy directly behind him, a woman with cold eyes and a scar across her cheek, drove her spirit weapon into the ground. Heilig Festung. A massive barrier of blue energy erupted around the entire area, cutting off any escape. Naruto didn't wait for them to complete whatever ritual they had planned. He summoned a dozen shadow clones and charged directly at Jurgen. The Quincy leader moved with practiced precision, his daggers flashing as he dispatched 3 clones in seconds. Pathetic. Your shinobi tricks cannot match Quincy artistry. But the clones were just a distraction. Naruto had activated the Almighty for a brief, targeted glimpse, just long enough to identify the weak point in Jurgen's defense pattern. The Quincy leader favored his right side, leaving a millisecond gap in his coverage during transitions. Naruto formed a Rasengan, but not a normal one. He infused it with a trace of the visionary's power, imagining the swirling chakra becoming denser, heavier, almost solid. He charged, feinted right, then struck at the exact moment Jurgen shifted his stance. The modified Rasengan connected with the Quincy's shoulder, but instead of the usual explosive impact, it did something strange. The spiritual particles that made up Jurgen's defense and uniform began to warp and distort, as if reality itself couldn't decide what form they should take. Jurgen screamed, staggering backward. What have you done? Improvised, Naruto replied, already moving to his next target. Across the battlefield, Yoruichi was a hurricane of violence. She'd already incapacitated 1 Quincy and was engaged with a second, a massive man wielding a spirit hammer. Her movements were too fast for normal eyes to track, each strike precisely calculated to disrupt the Quincy's spirit energy flow. The female Quincy who had erected the barrier abandoned her position to assist Jurgen. He's contaminating your spiritual particles. Cut off the affected area. Jurgen grimaced, drawing a small silver device from his pocket. He pressed it against his distorted shoulder, and a searing flash of blue light erupted. When it faded, his entire arm was gone, cleanly severed at the shoulder. "Extreme but effective," he muttered, showing no pain despite the grievous injury. "Now, Heir, let me show you true Quincy power." He activated a strange medallion that hung around his neck. Vollständig, Gottsage. A massive surge of spiritual energy exploded outward as Jurgen transformed. Blue-white wings of pure energy erupted from his back, and his eyes glowed with an inner light that reminded Naruto disturbingly of the Almighty's power. "I possess a fraction of His Majesty's foresight," Jurgen declared, his voice resonating with newfound power. "Enough to counter your untrained abilities." He vanished, reappearing directly behind Naruto, his remaining arm already swinging toward Naruto's spine. Naruto should have been caught completely off guard, but he wasn't. The Almighty had shown him this exact move seconds before Jurgen executed it. He twisted, catching the Quincy's wrist mid-strike. "Here's the thing about foresight," Naruto said, his eyes momentarily flashing with the power of the Almighty. "It's only useful if you're faster than your opponent." He channeled the visionary, visualizing Jurgen's Vollständig form becoming unstable, the spiritual particles rejecting their forced arrangement. For a moment, nothing happened. Jurgen smiled cruelly. "Your powers are still too raw, too unfocused," then his wings flickered, like a television losing signal. The perfect formation of spiritual particles began to waver, destabilizing at a fundamental level. "Impossible!" Jurgen gasped. "You cannot interfere with Vollständig once activated." "I'm not interfering with your technique," Naruto replied, maintaining his focus. "I'm redefining what spiritual particles can and can't do in this particular 10-foot radius." Big difference. The Quincy's transformation collapsed entirely, leaving him vulnerable and disoriented. Naruto didn't waste the opportunity. He delivered a devastating uppercut, enhanced with just enough chakra to send Jurgen flying backward into the barrier's edge. The remaining Quincy's recognized the tide turning against them. The female barrier maker shouted something in German, and all three still conscious Quincy's activated small devices on their wrists. "This isn't over, Heir," the woman called out. "The Quincy bloodline will reclaim what is rightfully ours." They vanished in flashes of blue light, taking their unconscious comrade with them. Only Jurgen remained, too badly injured to escape. Yoruichi approached the fallen Quincy leader, her expression grim. "They abandoned you. Not very loyal for an elite force." Jurgen coughed, blood staining his white uniform. "Loyalty is to the mission, not the individual." Naruto knelt beside him. "Why attack now? Why not wait until I had better control of these powers?" "Because," Jurgen wheezed, "once you fully integrate the Almighty, extraction becomes impossible. We had one chance. And now?" The Quincy's lips curved in a pained smile. "Now, you face the consequences of wielding a power you don't understand." His eyes rolled back, and his body began to glow with an eerie blue light. Yoruichi grabbed Naruto's arm, pulling him away. "Move. He's self-destructing." They barely made it to cover before Jurgen's body erupted in a massive explosion of spiritual energy. The barrier shattered, and a pillar of blue light shot skyward, visible for miles. "Well," Naruto said as the dust settled, "that was subtle." Yoruichi's expression was serious. "That wasn't just a suicide technique. That was a beacon. He just announced your position to every spiritually aware being in a 100-mile radius." "Great," Naruto groaned. "So we've got Soul Society, Aizen, and now Quincy remnants all after me. Anyone else want to join the party?" "Don't tempt fate," Yoruichi warned. "We need to get back to Urahara's. That pill he gave you is temporary, your control over the Almighty will start slipping again soon." As they made their way back through hidden paths Urahara had established, Naruto couldn't shake a nagging feeling. The Quincy's words kept repeating in his mind, Consequences of wielding a power you don't understand. Yoruichi, he finally asked, what happened to the previous Soul King? The real one. She was silent for a long moment before answering. That's complicated. And not something discussed openly. I think I need to know. She sighed. The Soul King wasn't just a ruler, he was a linchpin, a cosmic keystone holding together multiple dimensions. But he wasn't always willing. What do you mean? The original Soul King was imprisoned, his limbs severed, his powers restricted, she explained quietly. He maintained balance not by choice, but by force. The noble families in Central 46 feared his power too much to allow him free will. Naruto stopped walking. And that's what they want to do to me? Turn me into some kind of battery for reality? That's one faction's goal, yes, Yoruichi admitted. Others would rather eliminate you entirely and find a more controllable replacement. Aizen likely wants to absorb your power for himself. The Quincy's want to extract it for their emperor's resurrection. And what do you want? Naruto asked, studying her face carefully. Yoruichi met his gaze directly. I want you to master these powers and make your own choice, not be forced into someone else's plan. Why? Why help me? You barely know me. She resumed walking. Because I've seen what happens when powerful beings are controlled by fear and politics. I left Soul Society because I refused to be part of a system that valued order over justice. And I'm not about to hand you over to that same system. There was something personal in her voice, a history of pain and disillusionment that Naruto couldn't miss. What happened to you, Yoruichi? He asked softly. What made you leave? She remained silent for several steps, and Naruto thought she might not answer. But then she spoke, her voice low and controlled. I was the captain of the 2nd Division and commander of the Stealth Force. I was born into the Shihoin clan, one of the 4 great noble families. My entire existence was planned out before I took my first breath. She paused, her golden eyes distant with memory. When Urahara was framed for crimes he didn't commit, I helped him escape. Not just because he was innocent, but because I finally saw the system for what it was, corrupt, fearful, manipulative. The nobles and Central 46 would sacrifice anyone to maintain their power structure. Naruto absorbed this information, seeing parallels to his own world. So you became a traitor to do what was right. I became a traitor by their definition, she corrected. But loyalty to a corrupt system isn't virtue, it's complicity. They reached Urahara's shop as dusk was falling. The eccentric shopkeeper was waiting for them, his expression unusually serious. We felt the Quincy's death beacon, he said without preamble. We need to move. This location is compromised. Where to? Naruto asked. I have a secondary facility, a pocket dimension anchored to a moving train, Urahara explained, already gathering essential equipment. It's virtually undetectable and constantly changing physical location. A train. Naruto repeated incredulously. Trust me, it's quite comfortable, Urahara assured him. And more importantly, it's our best chance to continue your training without interruption. As they prepared to depart, Naruto felt a strange tug at the back of his mind, the Almighty trying to show him something important. He allowed a brief glimpse, opening himself to the flow of futures. What he saw was confusing, cherry blossoms. A massive white tower. Yoruichi's face, twisted in pain. And something else, a figure shrouded in darkness, manipulating events from afar. Naruto. Yoruichi's voice pulled him back to reality. You okay? Yeah, he lied, shaking off the disturbing vision. Just tired. But he wasn't tired. He was worried. Because for the first time since receiving these powers, the Almighty had shown him a future he couldn't fully interpret, a future shrouded in uncertainty and danger. And that scared him more than anything. Urahara's secondary facility was unlike anything Naruto had imagined. From the outside, it appeared to be an ordinary passenger car on a cross-country train. Inside, however, it expanded into an impossibly large space containing living quarters, training areas, and a fully equipped research laboratory. Dimensional engineering, Urahara explained proudly as Naruto gaped at the interior. The car exists in multiple planes simultaneously, giving us essentially unlimited space while maintaining a minimal physical footprint. It's like a TARDIS, Naruto remarked, then paused. Wait, how do I know what a TARDIS is? We don't have Doctor Who in the shinobi world. Side effect of the Almighty, Yoruichi explained, setting down her small travel bag. It's not just seeing the future, it occasionally gives you access to knowledge from parallel dimensions. You'll get used to it. The train provided the perfect environment for Naruto's continued training. As it crisscrossed the country, its constant movement made it nearly impossible for pursuers to track them. Within this relative safety, Naruto made significant progress. He learned to maintain the Almighty's awareness without being overwhelmed, to select specific futures to examine while filtering out irrelevant possibilities. The visionary proved more challenging, its power was directly linked to his emotional state, making consistency difficult. The key is belief without desperation, Yoruichi instructed during one particularly frustrating session. When you're calm, the visionary responds naturally. When you're anxious, it either fails or overperforms. Easy for you to say, Naruto grumbled, trying and failing to transform a simple wooden block into metal. You're not the one with reality-warping performance issues. Yoruichi smirked. Interesting analogy. Despite the occasional friction, they worked well together. Yoruichi's centuries of experience complemented Naruto's adaptability and determination. She pushed him relentlessly, but always seemed to know exactly when to ease up before he reached his breaking point. In the rare moments between training sessions, they talked. Not about powers or threats or destiny, but about their lives, their homes, their pasts. Naruto told her about Konoha, about growing up alone, about finding his place among friends who became family. Yoruichi shared stories of Soul Society before its corruption, of her childhood rebellions, of the weight of nobility she'd gladly abandoned. One evening, after a particularly grueling day of training, they sat on the observation platform Urahara had installed on the train's roof. The countryside rolled by beneath them, a patchwork of fields and forests under a star-filled sky. Can I ask you something personal? Naruto ventured, leaning back on his elbows. Yoruichi raised an eyebrow. You can ask. I might not answer. Why me? I mean, why are you personally involved in this? Urahara I get, he's a scientist, and I'm basically a walking physics violation. But you. She was quiet for a moment, watching the stars. Would you believe me if I said it was just professional interest in the Soul King's heir? Not for a second. A smile tugged at her lips. Smart boy. She sighed, stretching her legs out in front of her. The truth is, I've been tracking the Soul King's seal degradation for decades. When it became clear a new heir would emerge, I volunteered to monitor the situation. But why you specifically? Because I'm one of the few beings in existence who can move freely between dimensions without detection, she explained. And because I have no loyalty to Soul Society, Hueco Mundo, or any other realm with a stake in controlling you. So you're an independent contractor, Naruto summarized. Something like that. She turned to look at him directly. But it became personal the moment I saw you use those powers for the first time. What do you mean? Most beings, when they suddenly access godlike abilities, immediately try to reshape the world according to their desires, she said softly. You use them to protect your friends and avoid unnecessary violence. That impressed me. Naruto felt unexpected warmth at her words. I'm not special. I just don't want to hurt people if I don't have to. And that's exactly what makes you special, she countered. Power doesn't corrupt you, it clarifies who you already are. There was something in her voice, a note of admiration that hadn't been there before. Their eyes met, and for a moment, the air between them seemed to change, becoming charged with something neither of them was quite ready to name. Yoruichi broke the moment first, standing up smoothly. We should get some rest. Tomorrow we start combat integration, using the Almighty and the Visionary together in synchronized attacks. But as she turned to go, Naruto caught her hand. The touch was impulsive, unexpected even to him. Yoruichi, he said, surprising himself with the steadiness in his voice. Thank you. For believing in me when literally the entire universe seems to want me dead or imprisoned. She looked down at their joined hands, then back to his face. Something shifted in her expression, a softening around the eyes, a slight parting of lips. For a heartbeat, Naruto thought she might say something more, something that would change everything between them. Instead, she squeezed his hand gently before releasing it. Don't thank me yet, kid. We've still got a long way to go. As she disappeared through the hatch back into the train, Naruto remained on the roof, staring up at the stars. The Almighty was quiet for once, not bombarding him with possible futures. Or maybe he was just getting better at filtering out the noise. Either way, for the first time since this bizarre journey began, he felt something like peace. It didn't last long. Wake up. Yoruichi's voice cut through Naruto's sleep like a knife. We've got company. Naruto bolted upright, instantly alert. Soul Society. Quincy's. Neither. Her face was grim in the dim emergency lighting of his quarters. Aaron Carr. At least 3 of them, heading straight for the train. Aaron Carr. The term was vaguely familiar from his training sessions, but details escaped him. Hollow Shinigami hybrids. Extremely dangerous. And these ones are wearing Aizen's signature spiritual markers. Naruto quickly pulled on his gear. How did they find us? Unknown, but we need to move now. If they reach the train while it's occupied, civilian casualties are guaranteed. They rushed to the main compartment where Urahara was already activating various defensive systems. Screens showed 3 white-clad figures moving at incredible speed across the countryside, converging on the train's position. They'll intercept us in approximately 2 minutes, Urahara reported calmly. I've prepared an emergency exit point half a mile ahead, a small clearing in the forest. We'll jump there and engage them away from the train. And then what? Naruto asked. We can't keep running forever. We don't intend to, Yoruichi replied. These are Aizen's direct subordinates. If we can capture one, we might get valuable intelligence about his plans. The plan was simple: jump from the moving train at the designated point, draw the Aaron car away from civilian areas, and attempt to subdue at least one for questioning. As the train approached the clearing, Urahara opened a specialized exit portal in the side of their compartment. Remember, he cautioned, Aaron car have 2 release forms, their Zanpakuto release and their Resurrection. The latter transforms them back toward their original hollow form with massively increased power. Got it. Don't let them power up, Naruto nodded. Exactly, Yoruichi confirmed. Now, jump. They leaped through the portal, landing in the forest clearing just as the train sped past. Seconds later, 3 figures appeared at the clearing's edge. The Aaron car were unsettling in their humanoid appearance, almost perfectly human except for fragments of bone-like masks adhering to various parts of their faces and bodies. They wore white uniforms with black trim, and each carried a sword. The leader, a lean, pale man with green eyes and tear-like markings on his face, stepped forward. Naruto Uzumaki. Soul King Heir. Lord Aizen requests your presence. Yeah, I bet he does, Naruto replied, automatically scanning the 3 with the Almighty. What he saw was concerning: these weren't ordinary subordinates. They were Espada, Aizen's elite. The leader was Ulquiorra Cypher, Espada 4. To his right stood a blue-haired, aggressive-looking man, Grimjow Jagerjax, Espada 6. The third was a woman with blonde hair and a sardonic expression, Tyr Harabel, Espada 3. This is not a negotiation, Okiura stated flatly. You will come willingly, or we will subdue you. Urahara stepped forward, his cane transforming into his Zanpakuto, Benihime. 3 Espada for 1 extraction mission. Aizen must be growing desperate. Grimjow grinned savagely. Or maybe we just wanted some fun. Soul Society's been boring lately. Enough talk, Tyr interrupted. We have our orders. The 3 Espada moved simultaneously, each targeting a different opponent. Okiura went straight for Naruto, Grimjow charged Urahara, and Tyr engaged Yoruichi. Naruto had faced fast opponents before, but Okiura's speed was on another level entirely. The Espada seemed to materialize directly in front of him, pale hand extended toward Naruto's chest. Your heart, Okiura stated emotionlessly. I will take it. But the Almighty had already shown Naruto this exact attack pattern. He twisted sideways, the Espada's hand missing him by millimeters. Sorry, I'm using that at the moment. Okiura's expression didn't change. Interesting. You predicted my approach perfectly. His eyes narrowed slightly. The Almighty is active within you. Naruto didn't waste breath confirming. He created a dozen shadow clones and surrounded the Espada, each clone preparing a Rasengan. Okiura merely blinked. Futile. He moved again, this time so fast that even with the Almighty's foresight, Naruto barely had time to react. The Espada destroyed all 12 clones in what appeared to be a single movement, his hand passing through each with surgical precision. Naruto used the momentary distraction to activate the visionary, focusing on a specific weakness he wanted to create in Okiura's defense. He imagined the Espada's incredible speed creating a vulnerability. The faster Okiura moved, the more spiritual energy would leak from his form, like friction heating a surface. It wasn't a massive reality alteration, just a small adjustment to the physics affecting one being. But it was enough. When Okiura charged again, a visible trail of green energy began bleeding from his form. The Espada noticed immediately, his eyes widening a fraction in what might have been surprise. What have you done? He demanded, his voice still eerily calm despite the energy leaking from his body. Changed the rules a little, Naruto replied, capitalizing on the moment by forming a specialized Rasengan, one infused with the concept of spiritual disruption rather than physical damage. Across the clearing, Yoruichi was engaged in a brutal exchange with Tyr Harabel. The female Espada wielded water-based abilities that turned even the moisture in the air into deadly weapons. Yoruichi countered with lightning-quick movements and precision Kido spells, neither combatant gaining a clear advantage. Urahara and Grimjow were creating massive destruction on their side of the battlefield, the scientists' calculated techniques clashing with the Espada's berserker aggression. Naruto refocused on his own battle as Okiura drew his Zanpakuto. It seems I must take this encounter more seriously. Your ability to manipulate fundamental principles is problematic. You have no idea, Naruto muttered, preparing for the Espada's next move. Okiura raised his sword. Enclose, Murcielago. A massive wave of black and green spiritual energy erupted from the Espada, engulfing him completely. When it cleared, Okiura had transformed, his mask fragment had extended into a horned helmet, bat-like wings extended from his back, and his spiritual pressure had increased exponentially. This is my resurrection, Okiura stated, his voice somehow even colder than before. Few have witnessed it. None have survived. Naruto activated the Almighty fully, knowing he needed every advantage. The future paths crystallized before him, and none of them looked good. In his current state, he couldn't match Okiura's released form. But there was one thread, one possibility where he survived. It required perfect timing and absolute control of the visionary. Okiura formed a glowing green energy spear, Luz de la Luna, and threw it with devastating accuracy. The weapon moved faster than sound, carrying enough destructive force to vaporize a small building. Naruto didn't dodge. Instead, he activated the visionary with laser focus, imagining a very specific alteration to reality, for the next 3 seconds, his body would exist slightly out of phase with normal spacetime. The energy spear passed through him as if he were a ghost, continuing on to obliterate a massive tree behind him. Okuyura's eyes widened fractionally. Impressive. But unsustainable. He was right. Maintaining that level of reality manipulation drained Naruto tremendously. He needed a new approach. Drawing on his shinobi training, Naruto created a complex pattern of shadow clones, each moving in seemingly random patterns. But it wasn't random, the Almighty had shown him the exact formation needed to momentarily confuse even Okuyura's enhanced senses. In the split second of confusion, Naruto activated the visionary again, this time with a different purpose. He didn't try to change himself or Okuyura directly. Instead, he altered the air between them, transforming it into a highly specialized spiritual conductor. When Okuyura fired his next attack, a blast of concentrated energy, the altered air caught the energy, redirected it, and channeled it back toward the espada in a perfect loop. Okuyura had no time to react to this impossible physics violation. His own attack struck him directly, sending him crashing into the forest floor with tremendous force. Naruto immediately followed up, using the Almighty to identify the brief window where Okuyura would be disoriented. He formed his most powerful technique, a Raisin Shuriken infused with the Visionary's reality-altering properties. The attack connected just as Okuyura was rising, the spiraling blades of wind and chakra enhanced to specifically disrupt the espada's spiritual structure. Okuyura's form destabilized, his resurrection flickering like a failing light. For the first time, emotion showed on the espada's face, genuine surprise. "What, are you?" he asked, his voice actually betraying confusion. Before Naruto could answer, a massive explosion rocked the battlefield. He turned to see Grimmjow standing over an injured Urahara, the scientist's blood staining the forest floor. "Kisuke!" Yoruichi shouted, momentarily distracted from her own battle. Tear capitalized instantly, forming a massive water construct that slammed into Yoruichi with devastating force, sending her crashing through several trees. The battle's momentum had shifted completely. Naruto found himself facing 3 espada alone, with both his allies temporarily incapacitated. "Surrender, Heir," Okuyura stated, regaining his composure despite his flickering form. "You cannot defeat all 3 of us simultaneously. Wanna bet?" Naruto challenged, though privately he knew the espada was right. Even with the Almighty and the Visionary, his stamina was limited. Using both powers so extensively had drained him severely. But he couldn't give up. If Aizen got hold of him, everything would be lost. He needed a desperate measure, something unexpected, something the espada couldn't anticipate. Drawing on his deepest reserves, Naruto activated both powers simultaneously, something Urahara had warned against. The Almighty to see all possible futures, and the Visionary to choose which one became reality. The effect was immediate and terrifying. Reality seemed to fracture around him, multiple timelines bleeding into one another. He saw himself winning, losing, dying, transcending, all happening simultaneously. The espada took involuntary steps backward, sensing the dangerous instability. "He's destabilizing the dimensional boundary," Tear warned. "This entire area could collapse." Grimmjow seemed less concerned. "Then let's grab him before he blows everything up." But Okuyura raised a hand, stopping his comrade. "No. This is unexpected. Lord Aizen must be informed before we proceed." With clear reluctance, the 3 espada retreated, opening a garganta, a tear in dimensional space leading back to Hueco Mundo. "This isn't over, Heir," Okuyura stated as they departed. "Lord Aizen has plans for you that span centuries. Today is merely a data point." As the garganta closed, Naruto released his hold on both powers, collapsing to his knees in exhaustion. The fractured reality settled back into a single timeline, the dimensional instability fading. Yoruichi limped back into the clearing, supporting a badly injured Urahara. "That was reckless," she chided, though her voice held a note of admiration. You could have torn a permanent hole in reality. It worked, didn't it? Naruto managed a weak smile. Barely, Urahara coughed, blood staining his lips. But impressive nonetheless. You're learning to improvise with these powers. Yoruichi helped Urahara sit against a tree trunk, then knelt beside Naruto. Are you okay? Using both powers simultaneously could have killed you. I'm fine, Naruto assured her, though in truth he felt like he'd run 1,000 miles. Just tired. She studied his face closely, then did something unexpected. She reached out and gently brushed his hair away from his forehead, her touch lingering for a moment. You're a terrible liar, she murmured, her golden eyes holding his. But you're alive, and that's what matters. There it was again, that charged moment between them, now intensified by the aftermath of battle. Naruto found himself leaning slightly toward her, drawn by something he couldn't name. Yoruichi seemed to realize the shift, her eyes widening slightly before she pulled back, resuming her professional demeanor. We need to move. The Espada might return with reinforcements. But something had changed between them, a boundary crossed, even if neither acknowledged it openly. As they gathered their strength and prepared to leave the battlefield, Naruto activated the Almighty one final time, seeking guidance on their next move. What he saw made his blood run cold. Soul Society. The white tower he'd glimpsed before, Senzaku, the Palace of Penitence. Captains gathering, preparing for war. And at the center of it all, an ancient scroll bearing a prophecy about the Soul King's heir. We need to go to Soul Society, he announced suddenly. Yoruichi and Urahara both stared at him as if he'd lost his mind. That's suicide, Yoruichi stated flatly. Your public enemy won there. There's something there we need, information about the Soul King's heir. A prophecy. It's the key to understanding what Aizen is planning. Urahara's eyes narrowed thoughtfully. The Almighty showed you this? Naruto nodded. Clear as day. We can keep running, but it won't matter if we don't know what endgame Aizen is working toward. Even if you're right, Yoruichi argued, infiltrating Soul Society is nearly impossible. The security after Aizen's defection is unprecedented. Nearly impossible isn't the same as impossible, Naruto countered. And we have advantages they won't expect. Like what? Like me, Naruto grinned, some of his usual confidence returning. They're expecting the Soul King's heir, someone trying to hide his power. What if instead, I give them exactly what they fear most? A direct challenge they can't ignore. Urahara chuckled despite his injuries. Creating a spectacle as a diversion while the real objective is achieved elsewhere. Classic misdirection. It's reckless, Yoruichi insisted, but Naruto could see her tactician's mind already working through the possibilities. When has that ever stopped us? He asked, meeting her eyes directly. A slow smile spread across her face. Never. And it's not about to start now. She helped Urahara to his feet. Let's get back to the train. If we're really going to infiltrate Soul Society, we need a plan that's either brilliant or insane. Knowing us, Urahara commented wryly, it will be both. As they made their way through the forest, Naruto felt a strange mix of dread and anticipation. They were heading directly into the lion's den, but for the first time since this journey began, they were moving forward with purpose rather than simply reacting to threats. And despite the danger ahead, that felt right. It felt necessary. It felt like fate. The infiltration of Soul Society began not with stealth, but with spectacle. Remember, Yoruichi cautioned as they prepared at the Senkamen, the dimensional gateway between worlds, the moment we cross over, every Shinigami in the Siriidii will know we're there. You'll have approximately 3 minutes to create your diversion before they mobilize completely. Naruto nodded, adjusting the specialized gear Urahara had provided, equipment designed to mask his spiritual signature just enough to get them through the initial barrier. 3 minutes is plenty, he assured her. I just need to be loud and obvious enough to draw everyone's attention. While I slipped through to the central library, Yoruichi confirmed. The prophecy scrolls should be in the restricted archives, heavily guarded. Urahara, still recovering from his injuries, would remain behind to monitor the gateway and ensure they had an escape route. The Senkaman will remain active for exactly 45 minutes, he reminded them. If you're not back by then, I'll have to close it or risk detection myself. We'll be back, Naruto promised, though the Almighty remained frustratingly vague about their chances. It was as if multiple critical timelines were converging on this moment, making clear prediction impossible. Yoruichi caught his uncertainty. Second thoughts? No, he replied honestly. Just wishing the Almighty would be more helpful about our odds. Sometimes not knowing is better, she said, checking her equipment one last time. It keeps you sharp, makes you fight harder. With final preparations complete, Urahara activated the Senkaman. The dimensional doorway shimmered into existence, revealing the passage to Soul Society, a long tunnel of swirling energy. Ladies first, Naruto gestured with mock gallantry. Yoruichi rolled her eyes but couldn't suppress a small smile. Try not to destroy the entire Siriidii while I'm gone. I have fond memories of certain sake bars. No promises. They stepped through together, the strange sensation of dimensional transition washing over them. The passage between worlds was disorienting, reality seemed to stretch and compress simultaneously. When they emerged, they found themselves on the outskirts of the Siriidii, the heart of Soul Society and home to the Shinigami. Massive white walls surrounded the sprawling city fortress, and in the distance, the imposing tower of Senzakyu rose above everything. Alarms will trigger in about 5 seconds, Yoruichi whispered. Make it count. Naruto grinned. Oh, I will. He channeled the visionary, focusing not on subtlety but on raw, unmistakable power. He imagined the sky above the Siriidii splitting open, revealing a massive, ethereal version of himself, 100-foot-tall projection visible to everyone in Soul Society. The effect was immediate and dramatic. The clear blue sky fractured like breaking glass, and an enormous image of Naruto appeared, towering over the city. The projection spoke, his voice booming across the entire Siriidii. Attention, Soul Society. I am the heir of the Soul King, and I've come to claim my birthright. Yoruichi stared up at the display, her expression a mix of horror and admiration. When I said create a diversion, I didn't mean declare war. Go. Naruto urged, maintaining the massive illusion. They'll all be focused on this now. She hesitated for just a moment, then nodded sharply. Be careful. And try not to get killed before I get back. With that, she vanished, using her unparalleled flash step to disappear into the Siriidii. Naruto didn't have long to wait for a response. Within seconds, alarms blared across the entire city, and he could see Shinigami mobilizing everywhere. The first to arrive were members of the stealth force, black-clad assassins moving with lethal precision. They surrounded him at a distance, clearly wary of engaging directly. Halt and surrender, their leader commanded. By order of Captain Soifon. Yeah, that's not happening, Naruto replied, deliberately walking forward toward the heart of the Siriidii. He wasn't here to fight unnecessarily, just to be the loudest, most obvious distraction possible. The stealth force attacked in perfect coordination, a dozen skilled assassins converging on him simultaneously. But the Almighty had already shown Naruto their attack pattern, and he moved with supernatural precision, evading every strike without landing a single blow himself. Is that the best you've got? He taunted, continuing his deliberate march forward. The next response was more serious. A burst of cherry blossom petals swirled into existence around him, the distinctive attack of Captain Byakuya Kachiki's Senbenzakura. Soul King Heir, Byakuya's calm voice came from atop a nearby building. Your trespass ends here. The lethal flower petals, actually thousands of tiny blade fragments, closed in from all directions, forming an inescapable sphere. Naruto smiled. This was exactly the level of response he'd hoped for. The more captains focused on him, the clearer Yoruichi's path would be. He activated the visionary again, imagining Byakuya's blade fragments passing harmlessly through him. The petals converged, and simply flowed through his body as if he were a ghost, reforming on the other side. Byakuya's eyes widened fractionally. Impossible. Not impossible, Naruto corrected. Just improbable. More Shinigami arrived with each passing minute, lieutenants, seated officers, and eventually more captains. Exactly as planned. The entire Siriidii was mobilizing against a single intruder, leaving other areas vulnerable. Naruto carefully measured his responses, using just enough power to seem threatening without causing actual harm. He evaded attacks, occasionally using the visionary for dramatic effects that reinforced his status as the Soul King's heir, but never actually retaliating. This restraint seemed to confuse the Shinigami more than aggression would have. They had expected a destructive showdown, not a bizarre parade through their stronghold. "What is your purpose here?" demanded Captain Toshiro Hitsugaya, the young ice wielder looking both furious and perplexed. "Just taking a tour," Naruto replied casually, checking his internal clock. Yoruichi should be reaching the central library by now. He needed to maintain the distraction for at least 10 more minutes. "This is not a game." Hitsugaya snarled, ice forming around his Zanpakuto. "Reign over the frosted heavens, Heirinmaru." A massive ice dragon erupted from the captain's sword, hurtling toward Naruto with devastating force. Rather than avoiding it entirely, Naruto allowed the attack to come close, then used the visionary to transform the ice into harmless snow that scattered around him. The display of power sent a visible ripple of unease through the gathered Shinigami. This wasn't just an intruder, this was someone who could casually negate a captain's shuriken. "I'm not here to fight," Naruto announced, loud enough for all to hear. "I'm here to understand what you fear so much about the Soul King's heir." His words seemed to trigger something, a shift in the atmosphere. The confrontation paused briefly as a new spiritual pressure entered the area, heavy and ancient. An elderly Shinigami with a long white beard and weathered face stepped forward, supported by a gnarled wooden staff. Captain Commander Genryusai Shigekuni Yamamoto, leader of the Godai 13 and the most powerful Shinigami in Soul Society. "Young heir," Yamamoto's voice was like ancient thunder, powerful but controlled. "You trespass in our realm and flaunt powers that threaten the balance of all worlds." Naruto met the ancient warrior's gaze steadily. "I didn't ask for these powers, old man. But I won't let anyone use them for their own agenda, not Soul Society, not Aizen, not the Quincy remnants." Yamamoto's eyes narrowed at the mention of Aizen. "You have encountered Aizen Sosuke?" "His espada tried to capture me 2 days ago," Naruto confirmed, sensing an opportunity to gather information. "He seems very interested in the Soul King's power." "As are all who seek to remake reality in their image," Yamamoto replied grimly. "The question, young heir, is what do you intend to do with such power?" It was a fair question, one Naruto had been asking himself since these abilities awakened. "I intend to understand it first. To master it. And then to use it to protect, not control." Noble words, Yamamoto acknowledged. But the path to destruction is often paved with noble intentions. The old captain raised his staff slightly. "I cannot allow you to roam freely in Soul Society, regardless of your claims. Surrender peacefully, and you will be treated with the respect befitting your position." Naruto almost laughed. Respect? Like the previous Soul King? Imprisoned, dismembered, used as a battery for reality? A murmur ran through the gathered Shinigami. Many seemed shocked by his words. Apparently, the true nature of the Soul King was not common knowledge even among their ranks. Yamamoto's spiritual pressure intensified. "You speak of matters beyond your understanding. Then help me understand," Naruto challenged. "What does the prophecy say about the Soul King's heir? What fate are you all so afraid of?" The captain commander's eyes widened slightly. "You know of the prophecy?" Before Naruto could respond, a new commotion erupted from the direction of the central library. Alarms blared, and shouts of "Intruder! Thief!" echoed across the Siriidii. Yoruichi. She must have obtained the scroll and been spotted during her escape. Naruto needed to create an opportunity for her to reach the Senkamen. This confrontation had served its purpose, now he needed an exit strategy. He activated the Almighty, seeking the clearest path to escape. What he saw was concerning. Yoruichi was being pursued by Captain Soy Fan herself, their past relationship making the chase intensely personal. At their current trajectory, they would reach the Senkamen just minutes before Urahara would be forced to close it. And something else, a shadow in the future, a presence watching events unfold with cold calculation. Not Aizen, but someone else. Someone waiting for the perfect moment to strike. Naruto refocused on the immediate threat. Yamamoto was preparing to engage directly, an outcome that would end badly for everyone involved. "Sorry, old man," Naruto said. Genuinely regretful about what he was about to do. "I'd love to continue this chat, but I've got a ride to catch." He activated the visionary with full force, focusing on the most dramatic effect he could safely create. He imagined the ground beneath the entire Siriidii becoming temporarily insubstantial, not enough to cause collapse, but enough to create momentary instability and confusion. The effect was immediate and spectacular. The solid ground rippled like water, buildings swayed, and Shinigami everywhere stumbled and fell. It lasted only seconds, but it was enough to break their formation. In that moment of chaos, Naruto used a technique he'd been practicing in secret, combining the visionary with his own flash step abilities. He imagined himself moving at impossible speed, covering vast distances in single bounds. He disappeared in a flash of golden light, leaving the disoriented Shinigami behind. His destination, the Senkamen, where he hoped to intercept Yoruichi and provide cover for their escape. He arrived at the gateway just in time to see Yoruichi emerging from the city, moving at her maximum speed with Soy Fan in hot pursuit. Tucked securely against Yoruichi's side was an ancient-looking scroll, their prize. "Yoruichi," he called, preparing to create a barrier between her and her pursuer. She spotted him and adjusted her course, heading directly for his position. "Open the gate," she shouted. "They're all behind me." Naruto activated the Senkamen using the technique Urahara had taught him. The dimensional doorway flickered to life, revealing the passage back to the living world. Yoruichi reached him just as Soy Fan closed in, the diminutive captain's face twisted with rage and betrayal. "You cannot escape." Soy Fan snarled, her Zanpakuto already released into its deadly stinger form. "Traitor! Go!" Naruto urged Yoruichi, pushing her toward the gate. "I'll hold them off." For once, Yoruichi didn't argue. The scroll was too important to risk. She dove through the Senkamen, the ancient document clutched tightly to her chest. Naruto turned to face the oncoming Shinigami, now led by both Soy Fan and Byakuya, with more captains rapidly approaching. He needed just a few more seconds to follow Yoruichi through the gate. He reached for the visionary one last time, planning to create a temporary barrier that would delay pursuit without causing harm. But before he could complete the technique, a strange sensation washed over him, like reality itself stuttering. The Almighty screamed a warning in his mind, showing him a future that was suddenly, violently changing. A new presence entered the battlefield, not a Shinigami, not an Arrancar, but something else entirely. A tall, elegant man with swept-back brown hair and a serene smile that didn't reach his calculating eyes. "Hello, Naruto Uzumaki," the newcomer greeted pleasantly. "I believe we're overdue for a meeting." Soy Fan and Byakuya both froze, their expressions shifting from determination to shock. "Aizen?" Soy Fan gasped. "Impossible," Byakuya added. "You are imprisoned in Muken." Aizen's smile widened slightly. "Reports of my incarceration have been exaggerated." Naruto felt cold dread settling in his stomach. The Almighty was showing him dozens of futures, and in every single one, something catastrophic happened within the next few minutes. You're not really here, Naruto realized, analyzing the spiritual signature. This is an illusion. Kyoka Suigetsu. Very perceptive, Aizen acknowledged. My physical form remains elsewhere. But my interest in you is quite real, Soul King's heir. Naruto edged toward the Senkaman, unwilling to turn his back on the dangerous newcomer even if he was just a projection. Sorry to disappoint, but I've got places to be. Oh, I think not, Aizen replied calmly. You see, while you've been playing this amusing game of cat and mouse, my real objective was always elsewhere. The realization hit Naruto like a physical blow. Yoruichi. He spun toward the Senkaman, the Almighty suddenly revealing the trap with perfect clarity. Aizen hadn't come for him directly, he'd orchestrated events to separate Naruto from Yoruichi, making her and the scroll the easier targets. Naruto lunged for the gateway, but it was already destabilizing, someone was interfering with it from the other side. You bastard! Naruto roared, turning back to Aizen's projection. What have you done? Simply adjusted the variables, Aizen replied, utterly calm in the face of Naruto's fury. Yoruichi Shihoin possesses knowledge and abilities that make her inconvenient to my plans for you. And now she carries the prophecy as well. Two birds, one stone, as they say. The Shinigami, momentarily forgotten in the confrontation with Aizen, seemed equally confused by the situation. Soifan looked torn between attacking Naruto and confronting Aizen's projection. Naruto didn't waste time on indecision. He charged the destabilizing Senkaman, simultaneously activating both the Almighty and the Visionary despite the risks. He needed to see what was happening on the other side, and he needed the power to force the gateway to remain open. The combined strain was immense, threatening to tear his consciousness apart. But through the dimensional distortion, he caught glimpses of chaos, Urahara fighting desperately against multiple assailants, Yoruichi surrounded by Arrancar, the scroll glowing with ominous energy. With a final surge of desperate power, Naruto forced the Senkaman to stabilize just long enough for him to dive through. He emerged into a nightmare. The peaceful clearing where they had established the gateway was now a battlefield. Urahara lay wounded against a tree, blood pooling beneath him. For Arrancar, not the Espada from before, but powerful nonetheless, were engaged in combat with Yoruichi, who was clearly wounded but fighting with ferocious determination. The ancient scroll lay on the ground between them, its parchment emitting an eerie blue glow. Naruto! Yoruichi shouted, spotting him emerging from the gateway. The scroll! It's a trap! Before he could react, one of the Arrancar, a slender, snake-like creature, lunged for the document, snatching it from the ground. Lord Aizen will be pleased, the creature hissed, holding the scroll aloft triumphantly. No, you idiot! Yoruichi screamed, genuine fear in her voice. It's unstable. Don't, too late. The scroll erupted in a blinding flash of blue-white energy, engulfing the Arrancar completely. When the light faded, nothing remained of the creature but a small pile of ash. But the energy didn't dissipate, it coalesced into a swirling vortex that began to expand rapidly, pulling everything toward its center. It's a soul convergence device. Urahara shouted weakly from his position against the tree. Designed to capture and redirect spiritual energy. The remaining Arrancar, realizing the danger, attempted to flee. Two were caught immediately by tendrils of energy that shot from the vortex, their bodies dissolving as their spiritual energy was absorbed. The third managed to open a garganta and escape, though not before being partially caught by the energy field, losing an arm in the process. Yoruichi was fighting against the pull, using her incredible speed to stay just ahead of the expanding field. Naruto, she called. You need to contain it. Use the visionary. Naruto didn't hesitate. He focused his power, imagining the energy vortex contained, limited, unable to expand further. For a moment, it worked, the blue field stabilized, its edges no longer growing. But then something went wrong. The vortex seemed to recognize the nature of the power being used against it. It pulsed once, twice, and then sent a feedback surge directly into Naruto's spiritual core. The pain was indescribable. It felt like every cell in his body was being torn apart and reassembled incorrectly. He fell to his knees, struggling to maintain consciousness. Through blurred vision, he saw Yoruichi racing toward him, desperation etched across her features. "Hold on. I'm coming." "No," he tried to warn her. "It's adapting. Stay back." But she didn't stop. Reaching him, she grabbed his shoulders, attempting to pull him away from the vortex's influence. "I'm not leaving you." The moment she touched him, the vortex reacted again. A massive tendril of energy shot directly toward them, moving faster than either could evade in their current state. Yoruichi saw it coming. And in that split second, she made a choice. She shoved Naruto aside with all her strength, sending him tumbling away from the energy field's reach. The action left her directly in the path of the incoming tendril. It struck her squarely in the chest, lifting her off the ground. Her body arched in agony as the energy began systematically breaking down her spiritual structure. "Yoruichi!" Naruto screamed, struggling to his feet. Her eyes found his, pain evident but determination still burning. "Get, to Urahara," she managed through gritted teeth. "The real scroll inside my." Before she could finish, another pulse of energy engulfed her completely. Her form began to dissolve, particles of spiritual energy being drawn into the vortex's center. Something broke inside Naruto. A dam of emotion, of power, of rage. He reached for both the Almighty and the Visionary simultaneously, no longer caring about the consequences. "No!" he roared, his voice carrying the weight of multiple realities. Time seemed to freeze. The Almighty showed him infinite futures, including ones where Yoruichi survived. The Visionary responded to his desperate need, attempting to make those futures real. Reality itself groaned under the strain, fracturing like glass as Naruto forced his will upon it. "She lives. She must live. I refuse any reality where she doesn't live." The vortex shuddered, its energy fluctuating wildly as it encountered a force equal to its own reality-altering properties. For one breathtaking moment, Yoruichi's form began to reconstitute, particles flowing back together. But the strain was too great. The conflicting forces of the scroll's ancient power and Naruto's desperate reality manipulation created a dimensional feedback loop. The vortex imploded, collapsing in on itself with catastrophic force. The resulting shockwave sent Naruto flying backward, slamming him into a tree with enough force to crack the trunk. Darkness crowded the edges of his vision as he struggled to remain conscious. When the dust settled and he could see again, the clearing was devastated. Trees were uprooted, the ground scorched in a perfect circle. Of the vortex, there was no sign. And where Yoruichi had been standing, nothing remained. Not even ash. "No," Naruto whispered, dragging himself to his feet. "No, no, no." He stumbled forward, searching desperately for any trace of her spiritual energy. There had to be something, some remnant, some echo. She couldn't just be gone. A weak voice called from the edge of the clearing. "Naruto-kun." Urahara was still alive, though barely. The scientist had managed to shield himself from the worst of the blast, but his injuries were severe. Naruto rushed to his side, kneeling beside the wounded man. "Urahara. Where is she? I can't find her." Urahara's eyes were filled with a sorrow Naruto had never seen before. The scroll, it was designed to capture and redirect spiritual energy. A weapon from the ancient war, before the Soul King's imprisonment. "I don't care what it was." Naruto snapped, grief making his voice harsh. "Where's Yoruichi?" "She's not gone," Urahara said softly. "Not entirely. The scroll doesn't destroy, it displaces. Her spiritual structure has been scattered across dimensions." Hope flared briefly in Naruto's chest. "Then we can find her. Bring her back." It's not that simple, Urahara cautioned. The displacement is deliberate, designed to separate spiritual entities into their component parts and scatter them beyond recovery. Beyond recovery for normal people, Naruto insisted. But I have the Almighty and the Visionary. I can find her. I can make her whole again. Urahara didn't immediately dismiss the possibility, which Naruto took as a good sign. Perhaps, the scientist acknowledged. But first, we need to understand what truly happened here. This was no accident, it was an elaborate trap. Aizen, Naruto growled, anger temporarily overwhelming grief. He knew we'd go after the prophecy. He wanted this to happen. Yes and no, Urahara coughed, blood staining his lips. The trap was real, but I don't believe Yoruichi was the intended target. You were. The implication settled over Naruto like a cold shroud. She took the hit meant for me. She made a choice, Urahara corrected gently. Don't diminish it by assuming she didn't understand the consequences. Naruto sat back, the full weight of everything crashing down on him. Yoruichi was gone, not dead, but scattered across dimensions, beyond normal means of recovery. And it was because she had chosen to save him. What did she mean? He asked quietly. About the real scroll being inside something. Urahara's eyes widened slightly. She had time to tell you that much? Check her quarters on the train. The inner pocket of the purple jacket she never wears. That's where she keeps her most important possessions. Naruto nodded, determination beginning to replace despair. I'll find it. And then I'll find her. Naruto-kun, Urahara said seriously, before you commit to this path, you should know, what happened here, the power you unleashed trying to save her, it was felt across all dimensions. Every being with spiritual awareness now knows exactly how powerful the Soul King's heir truly is. I don't care, Naruto replied, helping the injured scientist to his feet. Let them come. Anyone who tries to stop me from bringing her back will regret it. As they made their slow, painful way back toward the hidden train, Naruto activated the Almighty one last time, searching desperately for any future where Yoruichi returned. What he saw was confusing, fragments, possibilities, paths that twisted in impossible directions. But there, in the furthest reaches of potential futures, he caught a glimpse of her, golden eyes, dark skin, that confident smile that made his heart race. She existed somewhere, somewhen. And he would find her, no matter what it took. Because in that moment of desperate power, when he'd reached across dimensions to try and save her, he'd finally understood what had been growing between them. It wasn't just respect or attraction or even friendship. It was love. Raw and real and terrifying in its intensity. And he would tear reality apart before he accepted her loss. Chapter 3, Divine Balance. Naruto tore through Yoruichi's quarters on the dimensional train, throwing clothes and equipment in all directions. His hands shook, not from exhaustion but from the raw, jagged grief. Threatening to swallow him whole. Purple jacket, he muttered, voice cracking. Purple jacket she never wears. He found it hanging in the back of her small closet, an ornate formal coat with the Shihoin clan symbol embroidered on the back. His fingers traced the stitching briefly before he dug into the inner pocket. There, wrapped in protective silk, was a small scroll no bigger than his palm. Unlike the trap scroll from Soul Society, this one radiated no spiritual pressure. It looked ancient but ordinary, which made it the perfect hiding place. Naruto carefully unrolled it, terrified of damaging what might be his only hope of finding Yoruichi. The text was written in an archaic script, portions faded beyond recognition. But what remained was clear enough: when the Soul King's eye seeks a new vessel, 3 powers shall emerge, the Almighty to see all paths, the Visionary to reshape reality's form, and the antithesis to reverse causality itself. Only when balanced in Trinity can the heir ascend without fracturing existence. Below the text was a complex diagram showing 3 interconnected circles, each containing a different symbol. Naruto recognized 2 immediately, the patterns that appeared in his eyes when using the Almighty and the Visionary. The third was unfamiliar, resembling a reversed arrow. The antithesis, he whispered. I don't have that power. No, you don't, Urahara confirmed, appearing at the doorway. He looked terrible, pale and bandaged, leaning heavily on his cane, but alive. That's why your control remains imperfect. The Trinity is incomplete. What is the antithesis? Naruto demanded, clutching the scroll tightly. The power to reverse events, to make what happened into what didn't happen and vice versa, Urahara explained, his voice weak but steady. It traditionally belonged to the Soul King's right hand, not the heir directly. And where is this right hand now? Urahara's expression darkened. Unknown. The last wielder vanished centuries ago. Some believe the power was sealed away to prevent anyone from challenging the Soul King's authority. Naruto stared back at the scroll. This prophecy, this is what Yoruichi risked everything to recover. Yes and no, Urahara sighed, easing himself onto a chair. This isn't just a prophecy, it's instructions. Yoruichi believed it contained the key to stabilizing your powers and preventing the fate that befell the original Soul King. Imprisonment and dismemberment, Naruto muttered bitterly. Precisely. But there's more. Urahara pointed to symbols at the bottom of the scroll. These describe a location, the boundary between dimensions where the Soul King's realm connects to all others. It's where the trinity of powers can be properly balanced. Hope flickered in Naruto's chest. And if I go there with the Almighty and the Visionary? You might be able to locate the antithesis, Urahara finished. And more importantly, you might find a way to reassemble Yoruichi's scattered spiritual particles. Naruto rolled the scroll carefully. Then that's where I'm going. It's not that simple, Urahara cautioned. That boundary is the most heavily guarded place in existence. The Royal Guard protects it from all intruders. And after your dramatic entrance into Soul Society, they'll be expecting you. I don't care, Naruto stated flatly. Yoruichi sacrificed herself for me. I'm not abandoning her. Urahara studied him silently for a moment. Your feelings for her run deep. It wasn't a question, but Naruto answered anyway. Yeah. They do. She would tell you it's foolish to risk everything for one person. Yeah, well, she's not here to tell me that, is she? Naruto snapped, then immediately regretted his harshness. Sorry. I have to try. Urahara nodded slowly. I understand. And I won't try to stop you. In fact, I'll help you. He pulled a small device from his pocket, a palm-sized metal disc etched with complex patterns. This is a dimensional resonance locator. If any fragments of Yoruichi's spiritual signature still exist, this will help you find them. Naruto took the device reverently. Thank you. Don't thank me yet, Urahara warned. The boundary can only be accessed through specific gates, all controlled by the Royal Guard. Breaking in will be nearly impossible. A determined smile spread across Naruto's face. Good thing I've got reality warping powers then. Urahara didn't return the smile. Naruto-kun, before you go, there's something else you should know. The trap that scattered Yoruichi, it wasn't Aizen's design. What? But I said it was a trap, yes. But after analyzing the energy signature, I'm certain it originated from a different source. Urahara's expression grew grim. The technique bears the hallmark of the Tsuneyashiro family, specifically, their current head, Tokunada. Another noble family? Naruto asked, confused. The most politically powerful of all, Urahara confirmed. And the most corrupt. Tokunada has always coveted control over the Soul King's power. If he's involved, then he's the one who needs to pay, Naruto finished, a cold edge entering his voice. Be careful, Urahara cautioned. Tokunada's Zanpakuto, and Reikyoden, can mimic the abilities of any Zanpakuto he's seen. He's extraordinarily dangerous. So am I, Naruto replied, pocketing the scroll and the locator device. How soon can we reach this boundary? Urahara raised an eyebrow. In my condition, I'd only slow you down. I need your knowledge, Naruto insisted. I can handle the fighting, but navigating dimensional boundaries. That's your expertise. After a moment's consideration, Urahara nodded. Very well. The train can take us to a junction point approximately 5 miles from the nearest gate. We'll arrive in 6 hours. 6 hours, Naruto repeated, glancing around Yoruichi's quarters one last time. I'll be ready. As Urahara left to make preparations, Naruto's gaze fell on a small photograph tucked into the corner of Yoruichi's mirror, a candid shot of her laughing at something off-camera, her eyes bright with mischief and life. He carefully removed it, tucking it into his jacket next to his heart. I'm coming for you, he promised quietly. No matter where they scattered you. The junction point turned out to be a desolate wasteland, a pocket dimension where reality itself seemed thin and fragile. The sky above wasn't blue but a strange, shifting purple-gray, with occasional flashes of light that resembled distant lightning. The Dangai Precipice, Urahara explained as they exited the train. A buffer zone between dimensions. The gate to the Soul King's realm lies approximately 5 miles in that direction. He pointed toward what looked like a mountain range on the horizon, though the mountains seemed to flicker in and out of existence depending on how Naruto focused his eyes. Those aren't really mountains, are they? Naruto asked, adjusting the equipment pack on his back. No, Urahara confirmed. They're dimensional folds, places where reality bends back on itself. The gate is hidden within the largest fold. They set off across the barren landscape, the ground beneath their feet occasionally shifting like sand, other times solid as stone. Naruto kept a cautious eye on their surroundings, the Almighty activated at a low level to warn of immediate threats. How will we open the gate once we find it? He asked after they'd been walking for nearly an hour. Conventionally. We can't, Urahara admitted. The Oken, the royal key, is required, and it's divided among the royal guard members. And unconventionally. Urahara smiled thinly. That's where your abilities come in. The gate doesn't just require a key, it requires recognition of specific spiritual signatures authorized to pass through. With the visionary. I could make the gate believe we're authorized, Naruto finished, understanding the plan. Precisely. Though it won't be easy. The gate's recognition system was designed by the Soul King himself. They continued in silence for another mile before Naruto sensed something, a subtle disturbance in the dimensional fabric ahead. He raised a hand, signaling Urahara to stop. We're not alone, he whispered, focusing the Almighty. The futures unfolded before him, multiple paths, all converging on a single outcome. Ambush. 3 figures, waiting behind that fold, he indicated a rippling distortion about 200 yards ahead. They're expecting us to follow this exact path. Royal Guard? Urahara questioned, already preparing defensive measures. Naruto frowned, concentrating harder. No, different spiritual signature. More, hollow-like. Urahara's expression darkened. Foolbringers. Tokunada has connections to several who operate outside Soul Society's authority. Can we go around? No need, Naruto replied, a plan forming. I have a better idea. He activated the visionary, focusing on a specific application he'd been practicing, creating temporary dimensional shortcuts. It wasn't true teleportation but more like folding space between 2 points. Stand close to me, he instructed Urahara. Concentrating intensely, Naruto visualized the space between their current position and a point beyond the ambush site simply, connecting. The air in front of them shimmered, then split open like a zipper being drawn across reality. Now, Naruto said, stepping through the opening. They emerged half a mile beyond the ambush site, the dimensional tier sealing shut behind them. Urahara looked impressed despite himself. Your control is improving rapidly. Necessity, Naruto replied grimly. I can't afford to waste power on flashy displays right now. They continued toward the dimensional folds, moving more cautiously now. The ambush they'd avoided suggested Tokunada knew they were coming, which meant the gate would likely be heavily guarded. As they approached the largest fold, a massive rippling distortion that resembled a waterfall of reality itself, Naruto activated the Almighty fully, scanning for threats and opportunities. What he saw made him freeze mid-step. Naruto-kun? Urahara questioned, noticing his sudden tension. The gate, Naruto said, his voice tight. It's already open. Impossible, Urahara breathed, squinting toward the fold. Unless someone wants us to enter, Naruto finished. It's a trap. Undoubtedly, Urahara agreed. But also our only path forward. They approached the fold cautiously, and as they drew closer, Naruto could see it clearly, a massive, ornate gate suspended within the rippling distortion, standing partially open. Golden light spilled from the opening, illuminating the otherwise dim landscape. The Ryokaia gate, Urahara identified it, awe evident in his voice. Despite the circumstances. One of only 3 entrances to the Soul King's realm. And conveniently unlocked, Naruto added sarcastically. Why do I feel like we're mice being invited into a trap? Because we are, Urahara stated simply. The question is, whose trap? Naruto consulted the Almighty again, searching for the safest path forward. The futures were clouded, multiple possibilities overlapping and contradicting. But one thing was clear, their presence was expected. We don't have a choice, he decided finally. Yoruichi's spiritual particles will continue dispersing the longer we wait. We go in, eyes open, ready for anything. Urahara nodded, adjusting his grip on his cane, which Naruto knew concealed his Zanpakuto, Benihime. Then let us spring the trap and see what awaits. They passed through the gate together, stepping from the barren wasteland into a realm of breathtaking beauty. The sky palace of the Soul King stretched before them, floating islands connected by shimmering bridges, majestic buildings of white marble and gold, all suspended in an endless azure sky. But something was wrong. The palace was eerily silent. No royal guard members patrolled the bridges. No servants moved between buildings. It's deserted, Naruto observed, keeping his voice low despite the apparent emptiness. Not deserted, Urahara corrected, pointing toward the central island, where the largest structure, the Soul King's palace itself, dominated the landscape. Waiting. Naruto followed his gaze and saw a lone figure standing at the palace entrance, tall, elegant, dressed in the ornate robes of a noble house head. Tokunada Tsunoyashiro, Urahara identified him, his voice hardening. Head of the Tsunoyashiro family and apparently our host. Where is everyone else? Naruto asked, scanning the surrounding islands for signs of the royal guard or other defenders. That, Urahara replied grimly, is an excellent question. They made their way toward the central island, crossing a crystal bridge that seemed to form under their feet as they walked. Naruto kept the Almighty active, searching constantly for hidden threats, but the futures remained frustratingly unclear, as if something was deliberately obscuring his foresight. As they approached the palace, Tokunada's features became clearer, aristocratic, cold, with an expression of perpetual amusement that didn't reach his calculating eyes. Welcome, Soul King's heir, he called, his voice carrying easily across the distance. I've been expecting you. Where's the royal guard? Naruto demanded as they reached the palace steps. Tokunada's smile widened. Indisposed. A series of unfortunate incidents required their attention elsewhere. How fortunate that I was available to safeguard the palace in their absence. Naruto didn't believe that for a second. You arranged all of this. The trap scroll in Soul Society, the Foolbringer ambush, the open gate. Perceptive, Tokunada acknowledged with a slight bow. Though not entirely accurate. Aizen arranged the scroll trap, I merely repurposed it to suit my needs. By targeting Yoruichi, Naruto growled, anger spiking. "A necessary adjustment," Tokunada replied dismissively. Yoruichi Shihoin was becoming too effective a protector. She needed to be removed from the equation. Naruto took a step forward, fury building in his chest, but Urahara placed a restraining hand on his arm. "Don't," he cautioned quietly. "That's exactly what he wants, to provoke you into attacking rashly." Naruto forced himself to remain still, though it took every ounce of control. "What did you do with her spiritual particles?" "Nothing permanent, yet," Tokunada answered, examining his manicured nails with feigned indifference. "They've been collected and contained. A useful bargaining chip, wouldn't you agree?" "What do you want?" Naruto demanded, though he already suspected the answer. Tokunada gestured expansively toward the palace behind him. "What everyone wants, Naruto Uzumaki. Power. Specifically, the power you currently possess, the Almighty and the Visionary. The twin crowns of the Soul King's authority. And the antithesis?" Naruto pressed, watching for a reaction. "The third power?" A flicker of surprise crossed Tokunada's features before his smooth mask returned. "Ah, so you found the real scroll. Impressive." "Yes, the antithesis completes the trinity, the power to reverse events, to rewrite cause and effect." "Where is it?" Naruto asked directly. Tokunada's smile turned predatory. "Closer than you might think. But that's not your immediate concern, is it? You came for the Shihoin woman's scattered remains." He produced a small crystal sphere from within his robes. Inside, swirling particles of golden energy pulsed and shifted, fragments of Yoruichi's spiritual signature. "Beautiful, isn't it?" Tokunada observed, holding the sphere up to the light. "The essence of a soul, broken down to its component parts. Not destroyed, but disassembled." Naruto's hands clenched into fists. "Give her back." "I'm afraid I can't do that," Tokunada replied with mock regret. "At least, not without something in exchange." "My powers," Naruto stated flatly. "That's what you want." "Specifically, I want you to transfer the Almighty and the Visionary to me," Tokunada confirmed. "A simple procedure, really. You simply need to, willingly relinquish them." Urahara stepped forward. "And why would he do that? Once he surrenders those powers, what guarantee does he have that you'll restore Yoruichi?" Tokunada's expression hardened slightly. "None whatsoever. But it's the only chance he has. Those spiritual particles will disperse completely within hours, becoming irretrievable even with the Visionary's capabilities." Naruto glanced at Urahara, uncertainty flickering in his eyes. Could he trust Tokunada to keep his word? Absolutely not. But what choice did he have? As if reading his thoughts, Tokunada added, "Of course, you could attempt to take the sphere by force. But I should warn you, it's been specially designed to shatter if handled improperly, scattering those precious particles across every dimension simultaneously." Naruto activated the Almighty, seeking a future where he successfully retrieved the sphere without damaging it. To his frustration, the paths remained clouded, as if something was blocking his foresight specifically around Tokunada and the sphere. "He's using something to block the Almighty," Naruto muttered to Urahara. "I can't see clear futures involving him." "Enreikyoten," Urahara replied quietly. "His Zanpakuto can mimic other abilities, including, apparently, ones that can obscure foresight." Tokunada spread his hands in a gesture of false hospitality. "I'm a reasonable man, Heir. I'll even offer you proof of my sincerity." He raised the sphere slightly. "Observe." He twisted the top of the sphere, causing a small portion of the golden particles to stream out. They hovered in the air for a moment, then coalesced into a partial manifestation, the ghostly outline of Yoruichi's face, her eyes closed, expression peaceful as if sleeping. "Yoruichi!" Naruto gasped, instinctively reaching toward the apparition. Before his fingers could touch it, the manifestation dissolved back into particles, which Tokunada quickly recaptured in the sphere. "Just a taste," the noble said smugly. "The rest awaits your decision." Naruto's mind raced, searching for options. He couldn't trust Tokunada, but he couldn't abandon Yoruichi either. There had to be another way. Then, a realization struck him. The Almighty couldn't see futures involving Tokunada directly, but what about indirect consequences? What about the environment around him? Focusing carefully, Naruto searched for futures where the palace itself changed, where structural alterations occurred as a result of actions he might take. There, a thin thread of possibility. If he used the visionary in a very specific way, targeting not Tokunada or the sphere, but the dimensional fabric beneath them. "I need time to think," he announced, feigning uncertainty. "This isn't a simple decision." Tokunada's expression showed clear satisfaction. He believed Naruto was wavering. "Take all the time you need. The Shihoin woman's remaining hours won't mind waiting." Naruto turned slightly, pretending to consult with Urahara. In reality, he was positioning himself for what would come next. "Get ready," he whispered to the scientist. "When I move, be prepared to catch something valuable." Urahara gave an imperceptible nod, his hand shifting slightly closer to his concealed Zanpakuto. Naruto turned back to Tokunada, his expression deliberately resigned. "Before I agree to anything, I want to see more of her. Prove that she's really in there, that her consciousness is intact." "Reasonable enough," Tokunada agreed, clearly believing he had the upper hand. He raised the sphere again, preparing to release more of Yoruichi's spiritual particles. That was the moment Naruto struck. He activated the visionary with laser focus, not targeting Tokunada or the sphere directly, but the dimensional fabric beneath the noble's feet. He imagined it becoming suddenly, catastrophically unstable, a localized dimensional hiccup that would disrupt everything within a 3-foot radius of Tokunada. The effect was immediate and violent. The seemingly solid ground beneath Tokunada rippled, then collapsed inward like a sinkhole made of reality itself. The noble's smug expression transformed into shock as he pitched forward, momentarily losing his balance, and his grip on the sphere. "Urahara, now!" Naruto shouted. The scientist moved with surprising speed despite his injuries. He flash-stepped forward, intercepting the falling sphere before it could hit the ground and shatter. In the same motion, he tossed something toward Tokunada, a small, glowing red orb that exploded into a binding Kido spell on contact. But Tokunada wasn't a noble lord for nothing. Even as he fell, he drew his Zanpakuto with practiced efficiency. "Reflect, and Reikioten." The blade shimmered, transforming into a mirror-like surface that absorbed the Kido spell, then reflected it back at Urahara with doubled intensity. The scientist barely managed to dodge, the redirected spell shattering a marble column behind him. Naruto didn't waste the opportunity. While Tokunada was distracted with Urahara, he charged forward, preparing to strike directly at the noble. But as he approached, Tokunada's sword shimmered again, taking on a new property. "Too slow, Heir," the noble taunted, slashing the air with his transformed blade. A familiar attack erupted from the sword, thousands of tiny blade fragments that resembled cherry blossoms. Senbonzakura's technique, perfectly replicated. Naruto recognized the attack pattern from his confrontation with Byakuya in Soul Society. This time, however, he was ready. Instead of trying to phase through the blades as he had before, he used the visionary differently, imagining the blade fragments becoming harmless light particles the moment they touched his spiritual energy. He charged straight through the swirling mass of blades, watching with satisfaction as they transformed into sparkling motes of light upon contact with his aura. Tokunada's eyes widened in genuine surprise. "Impossible," the noble hissed. "No one simply nullifies Senbonzakura." "I'm not no one," Naruto replied, closing the distance between them. "I'm the Soul King's heir." He launched a direct attack, not with the visionary or the Almighty, but with pure physical combat, a strategy Tokunada clearly hadn't anticipated. The noble was skilled with a sword but unprepared for Naruto's shinobi hand-to-hand techniques. A swift feint followed by a devastating uppercut caught Tokunada squarely under the chin, sending him staggering backward. Naruto pressed the advantage, landing a series of punishing blows before the noble could recover. "Urahara!" Naruto called out. "The sphere." "Intact," the scientist confirmed, carefully examining the crystal container. "But I can't open it safely without proper equipment." Tokunada, recovering his balance, laughed coldly despite the blood trickling from his split lip. "Of course you can't. That sphere was designed specifically to be unopenable by anyone except me." He raised his Zanpakuto again, the blade shimmering as it adopted yet another ability. "Perhaps you prefer a different approach?" "Scatter, Kyoka Suigetsu." The air around them rippled as Aizen's perfect hypnosis technique activated. Reality itself seemed to waver and shift, multiple identical versions of Tokunada appearing throughout the palace courtyard. "Which is real, Heir?" all the Tokunadas asked simultaneously. "Strike the wrong one, and the sphere shatters remotely." Naruto activated the Almighty, trying to pierce the illusion, but the same interference prevented clear foresight. The ability to replicate Kyoka Suigetsu made Tokunada almost as dangerous as Aizen himself. "Almost. Nice trick," Naruto acknowledged, seemingly confused by the multiple images. "But there's something you didn't consider." "And what might that be?" the Tokunadas asked in unison. Naruto smiled grimly. "The visionary doesn't care what's real and what isn't. It rewrites reality itself." He closed his eyes, concentrating on a simple, absolute concept: there is only one Tokunada, and I know exactly where he is. When he opened his eyes, all the false images had vanished, leaving only the real Tokunada standing near a marble fountain, his expression shifting from smugness to alarm. "Impossible," the noble sputtered. "Kyoka Suigetsu's complete hypnosis cannot be broken." "I didn't break it," Naruto explained, stalking toward him. "I just decided it wasn't real anymore." "Big difference." Tokunada's composure cracked further. He hadn't expected to face the full capabilities of the visionary wielded with such precision. His plan had assumed a novice still struggling with control, not someone who could casually rewrite the rules of perception. "Stay back," he warned, raising his sword defensively. "I still control the sphere's integrity. One command from me, and those precious particles disperse forever." Urahara stepped forward, the sphere held carefully in his hands. "Actually, that may no longer be accurate." He displayed the sphere, where a small device of his own design now adhered to its surface. "My dimensional stabilizer should prevent any catastrophic dispersal, regardless of your commands." Tokunada's eyes widened in genuine fear for the first time. His leverage was slipping away. In desperation, he flash-stepped toward Urahara, his sword transforming yet again, this time taking on the properties of Yamamoto's flame Zanpakuto, Ryujin Jaka. "If I can't have the Heir's powers, no one will," he snarled, bringing the flame-wreathed blade down toward the sphere in Urahara's hands. Naruto reacted instantly. The Almighty showed him the immediate future, the blade connecting, the sphere shattering despite Urahara's device, Yoruichi's essence lost forever. He refused to accept that future. With desperate focus, he activated both the Almighty and the Visionary simultaneously, ignoring the dangerous strain. He saw the path, the exact millisecond where intervention was possible, and he rewrote reality around that single moment. Time seemed to slow, then stop completely around Tokunada's descending blade. The flames froze mid-flicker, suspended in a moment that stretched into eternity. "What have you done?" Tokunada gasped, finding his arm completely immobilized, trapped in a bubble of altered time. "Changed the rules," Naruto replied, his voice strained from the effort of maintaining such precise temporal manipulation. "But only temporarily." He flash-stepped to Urahara, taking the sphere from the scientist's hands. "Can you neutralize him while I deal with this?" Urahara nodded, drawing Beneheim fully. "With pleasure." As the scientist engaged the temporarily disadvantaged Tokunada, Naruto focused on the sphere containing Yoruichi's essence. The Almighty showed him the structure, complex, multidimensional, designed to contain and preserve spiritual particles. But there was something else, something hidden within the sphere's core. A small, dark crystal that pulsed with malevolent energy. "Urahara," he called out. "There's something inside the sphere, some kind of contaminant." The scientist, who had Tokunada pinned behind a powerful Kido barrier, glanced over in alarm. "Don't open it. It's probably a failsafe, a spiritual toxin designed to corrupt her essence if tampered with." Naruto studied the sphere carefully through the Almighty's perception. The containment itself wasn't the problem, it was what Tokunada had added to Yoruichi's spiritual particles. He needed a way to purify her essence before releasing it. But how? The answer came from an unexpected source, the real scroll in his pocket. He pulled it out, studying the Trinity diagram again. The Almighty to see, the visionary to change, but what he needed now was the antithesis, the power to reverse. "Reverse," he murmured, an idea forming. "That's it." He couldn't use the antithesis directly since he didn't possess it. But maybe he could simulate its effect using both his existing powers together in a very specific way. He activated the Almighty, searching for the exact moment when Tokunada had contaminated Yoruichi's essence, seeing backward through time to identify the original, pure state of her spiritual particles. Then, with the visionary, he focused on restoring that exact state, effectively reversing the contamination. It wasn't true antithesis, he couldn't swap the contamination from her particles to something else, but it was a close approximation. The sphere began to glow as Naruto concentrated, the dark crystal at its core shrinking as his power purged the malevolent energy. Sweat beaded on his forehead from the strain of such precise manipulation. Across the courtyard, Tokunada broke free from Urahara's barrier with a desperate surge of power. "No," the noble screamed, lunging toward Naruto. "You'll ruin everything." But it was too late. The dark crystal shattered, its energy dispersing harmlessly. The golden particles within the sphere began to pulse more vibrantly, more harmoniously. Naruto looked up, meeting Tokunada's furious gaze with calm determination. "It's over. Your contamination is gone. You fool." Tokunada snarled, his aristocratic mask completely abandoned now. "Do you have any idea what you've done? Those particles were being prepared as a vessel." "A vessel?" Urahara questioned, positioning himself between Naruto and the enraged noble. "For what?" Tokunada's laugh was bitter, bordering on hysterical. "For the antithesis, of course. I spent centuries locating it, extracting it from its original bearer. It needed a powerful host, someone strong enough to contain it without being consumed." Understanding dawned on Naruto. "You were going to force the antithesis into Yoruichi's reconstituted form. Make her your weapon." "My key," Tokunada corrected. "With a wielder of the antithesis under my control, I could have extracted your powers safely, completing the trinity within myself. I would have become the new Soul King, not a prisoner like the original, but a true god." Naruto's expression hardened. "Where is it? Where did you hide the antithesis after extracting it?" Tokunada's face twisted into a cruel smile. "Closer than you think, Heir." He raised his Zanpakuto, which began to emit a strange, reversed aura, power flowing inward rather than outward. Enreikyoten doesn't just mimic abilities, it can absorb them permanently, under the right circumstances. Horror dawned on Urahara's face. "You absorbed the antithesis into your Zanpakuto." "Not just absorbed," Tokunada boasted. "Mastered. And now, I'll demonstrate its true potential." He slashed his sword through the air, creating a bizarre visual distortion. "The antithesis, activate." The effect was immediate and disorienting. Naruto felt reality shifting around him, not like the visionary's changes, but like cause and effect themselves were being rewritten. Wounds Tokunada had suffered during their fight transferred to Naruto's body, while the noble's injuries healed completely. "Do you see now?" Tokunada gloated, standing tall and uninjured while Naruto staggered under the sudden pain of transferred wounds. "The perfect complement to your powers. The Almighty sees all possibilities, the visionary makes them real, and the antithesis ensures that any damage I suffer is reversed back upon my enemies." Naruto fell to one knee, blood seeping from wounds that had appeared out of nowhere. The sphere containing Yoruichi's essence nearly slipped from his grasp. Urahara moved to support him, but Tokunada struck again with Enreikyoden, this time mimicking Soifan's death sting technique. The scientist barely avoided the attack, forced to retreat several steps. "First, I'll reclaim the Shihoin woman's essence," Tokunada declared, advancing on the wounded Naruto. "Then I'll extract your powers, painfully, if necessary." Naruto clutched the sphere protectively, mind racing for a solution. The Almighty showed him futures where he tried to fight back directly, all ending in failure as the antithesis continually reversed the damage back onto him. But then, a different approach emerged, not attacking Tokunada or the sword, but attacking the connection between them. With tremendous effort, Naruto activated the visionary one more time. Instead of trying to harm Tokunada, he focused on the noble's Zanpakuto itself, imagining a fundamental change in its spiritual structure. Enreikyoden rejects the antithesis. The sword in Tokunada's hand suddenly pulsed with conflicting energies, its mirrored surface cracking along the edge. "What are you doing?" the noble demanded, staring at his weapon in alarm. "Your sword mimics other Zanpakuto," Naruto explained, struggling to his feet despite his injuries. "But the antithesis isn't a Zanpakuto ability, it's one of the Soul King's fundamental powers. It was never meant to be contained in a mere weapon." The cracks in Enreikyoden spread further, glowing with reversed energy trying to escape its confines. "No!" Tokunada cried, attempting to stabilize his Zanpakuto through sheer will. "I spent centuries mastering this power. You cannot simply reject it." "I'm not rejecting it," Naruto corrected, his voice growing stronger as his strategy unfolded. "I'm freeing it to find its proper vessel." With a final, catastrophic crack, Enreikyoden shattered. From its broken remains, a swirling vortex of reversed energy erupted, the antithesis, finally released from its imprisonment. The power hovered in the air, pulsing with potential, seeking a suitable host. It moved toward Naruto briefly, as if recognizing his status as the Soul King's heir. But then, unexpectedly, it turned, flowing directly toward the sphere in Naruto's hands. "No!" Tokunada screamed, lunging forward in a desperate attempt to recapture the escaping power. Urahara intercepted him with a binding Kido, restraining the noble long enough for the antithesis to reach its destination. The sphere containing Yoruichi's essence began to glow brilliantly as the antithesis merged with the golden particles within. The crystal container shuddered, then cracked open like an egg, releasing a blinding flash of combined energy. When the light faded, Yoruichi stood before them. But not quite the Yoruichi they had known. Her form was solid but slightly translucent, her eyes glowing with the power of the antithesis. Golden energy swirled around her body like an aura, her spiritual pressure now immense and transformed. "Yoruichi!" Naruto whispered, hardly daring to believe what he was seeing. Her eyes focused on him, recognition dawning through the glow of power. "Naruto," she replied, her voice echoing slightly as if coming from multiple dimensions simultaneously. "You came for me." "Always," he answered simply, relief washing through him despite his injuries. Her gaze shifted to Tokunada, who was struggling against Urahara's restraints with increasing desperation. Understanding seemed to flow into her with the antithesis's knowledge. "You," she said coldly. "You tried to use me as a vessel for power you couldn't control. The power chose you in the end," Tokunada spat, still struggling. "You should be grateful. You're now part of the Trinity." "And you," Yoruichi replied, stepping toward him with menace, "are a manipulator who's caused suffering across multiple dimensions." She raised her hand, the antithesis glowing around her fingertips. Let me show you what this power really does. Before she could strike, however, the palace around them began to shake violently. Massive cracks appeared in the marble floor, spreading outward like a spider's web. What's happening? Naruto demanded, looking to Urahara for answers. The scientist's expression was grim. The Trinity has been activated but not balanced. With all three powers active simultaneously but separated between two bearers, the dimensional fabric is destabilizing. As if to confirm his words, the sky above shattered like glass, revealing glimpses of other dimensions beyond, Soul Society, Hueco Mundo, the living world, and others without names, all bleeding into one another at the fracture points. We need to stabilize the Trinity, Urahara urged, releasing his hold on Tokunada to focus on the more immediate threat. The three powers must be brought into harmony, or all dimensions will collapse. Tokunada, seeing his opportunity, made a break for freedom. But before he could escape, Yoruichi appeared in front of him with impossible speed. Going somewhere? She asked coldly. The noble backed away, fearful for the first time. Without Enreikyoten or the antithesis, he was no match for her enhanced power. This isn't over, he threatened weakly. The dimensions are collapsing, we'll all be destroyed. Not if we act quickly, Yoruichi countered. With a swift, precise movement, she touched his forehead with her glowing fingertips. The antithesis, stasis. Tokunada froze in place, neither living nor dead, caught in a state between moments, a prisoner of reverse time. With the immediate threat neutralized, Yoruichi turned back to Naruto and Urahara. How do we stabilize the Trinity? Urahara pulled out the original scroll, pointing to the diagram. According to this, the three powers must be either united in one bearer who can balance them, or synchronized between separate bearers through a conscious connection. I can't absorb the antithesis from you, Naruto told Yoruichi, and I wouldn't want to. It chose you. Then we synchronize, she decided, reaching for his hand. Create a connection between the Almighty, the Visionary, and the antithesis. Around them, the palace continued to crumble, entire sections disappearing into the dimensional void. The fractures in reality were spreading faster, threatening to engulf everything. How? Naruto asked urgently. I don't know how to create that kind of connection. I do, Yoruichi replied, her eyes glowing brighter. The antithesis carries knowledge, memories from its previous bearers, understanding of its own nature. It shows me the way. She placed one hand on Naruto's chest, directly over his heart. The connection requires absolute trust and, something more. Their eyes met, understanding passing between them without words. What had been growing between them since the beginning, respect, admiration, attraction, and finally love, would be the foundation of the connection. I trust you, Naruto said simply. Completely. Yoruichi smiled, the glow of the antithesis softening. And I trust you. She glanced at Urahara. Stand back. This will release a significant energy wave. The scientist nodded, creating a protective barrier around himself. Yoruichi turned back to Naruto, her expression serious but tender. This will hurt, but stay with me. She pressed her palm more firmly against his chest, and the antithesis began to flow, not leaving her, but extending, creating a connection between their spiritual cores. The pain was immediate and intense, like liquid fire flowing through Naruto's veins. But it wasn't destroying, it was transforming, creating pathways between his powers and hers. Through the burning connection, he felt her, not just her power, but her essence. Her courage, her rebellious spirit, her unwavering loyalty to those she cared for. And deeper still, her feelings for him, complex, powerful, genuine. In turn, she experienced him, his determination, his compassion, his refusal to abandon those important to him. His love for her, raw and real and unshakable. The Almighty activated of its own accord, showing Naruto not just futures but the present across all dimensions simultaneously. He saw the fractures spreading, worlds beginning to bleed into one another, the fundamental fabric of reality starting to unravel. With newfound clarity, he understood what needed to be done. The three powers working in concert could heal these fractures, the Almighty to see them, the Visionary to imagine them whole, and the Antithesis to reverse the damage that had been done. Yoruichi, he gasped through the pain of the connection. I see it now. We need to heal the boundaries. She nodded, her own vision expanded through their link. Together. They raised their free hands, power flowing between them in a perfect circuit. The Almighty identified each dimensional fracture, the Visionary conceptualized its repaired state, and the Antithesis reversed the damage, making whole what had been broken. Energy erupted from their joined hands, shooting upward into the shattered sky. Where it touched the fractures, reality knitted back together, dimensions separating and stabilizing. The process was exhausting, draining both of them to their limits and beyond. But the connection between them provided strength, each supporting the other when they began to falter. Gradually, the violent shaking subsided. The fractures closed. The dimensions realigned themselves properly, separate but connected through natural, stable pathways rather than chaotic breaks. As the final fracture sealed, the energy flowing between Naruto and Yoruichi changed, no longer painful but harmonious, settling into a permanent, balanced connection. They collapsed to their knees, still holding on to each other, the glow of power slowly fading from around them. Did we do it? Naruto asked, his voice hoarse from exertion. Urahara, lowering his protective barrier, looked around in wonder. Yes. The dimensional boundaries have been restored, strengthened, even. The Trinity is balanced. Yoruichi touched her chest, feeling the change within her. The Antithesis has fully integrated with my spiritual core. It's part of me now. And part of us, Naruto added, feeling the subtle connection that remained between them even as the visible energy faded. The powers are separate but synchronized. Which raises an interesting question, Urahara observed, glancing toward the center of the palace. What about the Soul King's position? The original purpose of these powers was to maintain dimensional balance from the throne. Naruto and Yoruichi exchanged a look, understanding dawning simultaneously through their connection. The Soul King was imprisoned because those in power feared his freedom, Naruto said slowly. Forced to maintain balance without choice or movement. But with the Trinity balanced between two bearers. Yoruichi continued, following his thought. The function can be maintained without the imprisonment, Naruto finished. We can preserve the balance while remaining free. Urahara looked thoughtful. A revolutionary concept. The noble families in Central 46 won't approve. They don't have to, Yoruichi replied with a hint of her old mischief. We just saved all of existence. I think that earns us some leverage in negotiations. They made their way to the throne room, a vast chamber at the heart of the palace. At its center, suspended in a crystal prison, was what remained of the original Soul King, a torso and head, eyes open but unseeing, surrounded by preservation Kido. Naruto approached reverently, feeling the ancient power that still resided within the diminished figure. He's been like this for thousands of years. Conscious but immobile. Aware but powerless to act. A fate worse than death, Yoruichi murmured. Through their connection, a decision formed, not one person's choice, but a shared understanding. Naruto activated the Almighty, seeking the consequences of what they were about to do. Yoruichi prepared the Antithesis, ready to reverse the ancient imprisonment. Are you certain? Urahara asked, understanding their intention. This will change everything. It already has, Naruto replied. With the Visionary, he imagined the crystal prison dissolving, the preservation Kido gently unraveling. Yoruichi activated the Antithesis, focusing on the moment of the Soul King's dismemberment, preparing to reverse that specific injury while maintaining the transfer of power that had already occurred. Together, they released the original Soul King from his eternal torment. The crystal dissolved. The Kido unraveled. The ancient being's body momentarily became whole again through the Antithesis's power. Then, with what might have been gratitude in his ancient eyes, the Soul King dissolved into particles of light, his essence finally free after eons of imprisonment. The particles swirled around the throne room once, then dispersed, spreading throughout all dimensions, not as a ruler, but as a benevolent presence, a fundamental part of reality itself. In the Soul King's place, a new structure formed, a crystal sphere that pulsed with balanced energy, maintaining the connections between dimensions without requiring a living sacrifice. The Trinity Core, Urahara identified it, examining the sphere with scientific curiosity. A self-sustaining system that draws on the balanced power of the Almighty, the Visionary, and the antithesis without requiring your constant presence. So we're not imprisoned here? Naruto asked, hardly daring to believe it. No, Urahara confirmed. As long as you both live and the connection between your powers remains intact, this core will maintain dimensional stability. You'll need to return periodically to reinforce it, but you're free to live your lives. Yoruichi squeezed Naruto's hand, relief evident in her expression. So what happens now? Now, Naruto replied, turning to face her fully, we decide what kind of life we want. Together. Their connection thrummed with shared emotion, no longer just about power, but about everything that had grown between them through danger and sacrifice and triumph. I think, Yoruichi said softly, I'd like to show you my world properly. Not just the fighting and running parts. And I want to show you mine, Naruto replied. Though I should probably explain to Sakura and Sasuke why I disappeared during that mission. Yoruichi laughed, the sound bright and free. I'm sure they'll understand once you tell them you were busy becoming the heir to cosmic power and saving all of existence. Naruto grinned. When you put it that way, it sounds almost reasonable. Their levity faded as they looked at Tokunada, still frozen in stasis. What about him? Naruto asked. Central 46 will want him for trial, Urahara noted. Though I'm not certain even they can handle him safely. Yoruichi considered the noble thoughtfully. The antithesis doesn't have to be permanent. I could reverse his stasis, in about 1,000 years. Fitting, Naruto agreed. He wanted power over time, now time has power over him. With the immediate crisis resolved and a new balance established, they prepared to leave the Soul King's palace. The royal guard would eventually return, and explanations would be needed, but those were concerns for another day. As they approached the gate leading back to the Dangai precipice, Yoruichi paused, turning to Naruto with sudden seriousness. There's something I need to tell you, she said. Something I realized when my essence was scattered. Naruto waited, giving her the space to continue. When you're reduced to your most basic particles, stripped of everything but your core self, she explained, you gain absolute clarity about what matters most. She took a breath. For me, that was you. Not just your power or your potential, but you, your spirit, your heart. I love you, Naruto Uzumaki. And that terrifies me more than anything we've faced. Naruto smiled gently, taking her hand. I know. I felt it through our connection. And you felt what I feel for you. Yes, she admitted. But I needed to say it aloud, with my own voice. Because some things shouldn't just be felt, they should be declared. In response, Naruto did something he'd wanted to do since that night on the train roof. He leaned forward and kissed her, not a desperate kiss born of adrenaline or fear, but a gentle, certain affirmation of everything that had grown between them. When they parted, the connection between their powers pulsed harmoniously, settling into a comfortable, permanent bond. So, Naruto said, a mischievous glint in his eye, which world first? Yours or mine? Yoruichi's smile matched his own. Does it matter? We have all of them now. Hand in hand, they stepped through the gate, leaving behind the ancient prison of the Soul King and walking toward a future neither of them could have imagined when their journey began, a future where balance didn't require sacrifice, where power didn't demand imprisonment, and where destiny was something they would shape together. Behind them, in the heart of the palace, the Trinity Core pulsed with stable, harmonious energy, a testament to a fundamental truth they had discovered: true balance comes not from control, but from connection. The end. Thank you for watching this video. Please be sure to subscribe to our channel and like this video.